Hey, what's up, everybody? How's it going? Alright, so we're to the end of our unit on ancient Greek myths. We're going to cover something totally different from here on out. Right now, you're at your domain review, or the end of unit review. So instead of reading you a story, I decided to do something completely different. I have a storybook for you. It's called Guitar Genius. The story of the legendary Les Paul, engineer of the solid body electric guitar. And you guys know that I love guitars. I even have another one hiding out over here. I love guitars. And I want to share my love of guitars with you guys by reading you a story about the guy who invented the electric guitar. So let's get started. Just know, I got no fancy camera tricks for this. There's no special effects. I'm just going to read you a story. I'm doing the best I can, so bear with me. Guitar Genius. How Les Paul engineered the solid body electric guitar and rocked the world. In a 3-story schoolhouse near the Fox River in Waukesha, Wisconsin, children scrambled into the music room. Tambourines shimmied, drums boomed, bells clanged, and little Lester loved it all. The punchy pluck of banjo chords and the bright twinkle of piano keys and the rise and fall of notes. Lester couldn't read the music sheets. Those tracks of squiggly lines and black dots didn't even make sense. But it didn't matter. The fun part was that all the sounds he could make. After his school piano lesson, his teacher sighed and pinned a note on his shirt. He skipped away home. "What does it say?" he asked, grinning from freckle to freckle. "Well," Lester's mother said gently, "it says that you'll never be musical." Lester's shoulders sank and his eyes stung. "Don't listen to her," his mother tore the paper into tiny pieces. "You are going to be great, really. You can do anything that you put your mind to." And Lester thought about that. He did a lot of thinking. One day, while he was stuffing newspapers for his paper route, his buddy Harry showed up with wrapping wire around an empty oatmeal can. "What are you doing, Harry?" "I'm building a crystal radio set." Well, that was interesting, so Lester gathered bits and parts and built his own crystal kit. Then he wired it right to the bed springs on his mattress for an antenna. Out from his home-built radio floated the warm drawl of guitar strings. Wowza! Tuner, antenna, oatmeal can, telephone, earpiece, and ground. Lester saved his paper route earnings until he had enough to order his very own guitar. As Lester opened the box, his finger hit one of the guitar strings. "You already sound great, Lester," his mom said. He didn't. Lester fumbled through the chords. His fingers floundered over the fretboard. He even blundered through the B notes. His hands weren't big enough to reach all the strings, so he removed one. And then he practiced and practiced until He could play the guitar, the banjo, and even the harmonica. He sounded so slick that the manager of the WTMJ invited him to play on the radio. "Mister," his mother said, "you don't know how good that sounds. I wish you could hear it like we do when you play on the radio." Lester wished that too. But he didn't own a recording device. It was the 1920s, and nobody he knew owned that sort of gadget. But that was okay. If he didn't have a recording device, he'd build one. He scrutinized the family's newfangled gizmos, tinkering in his mother's living room, in his father's garage, and then he took apart everything. Things like the phonograph, the player piano, the telephone, and the radio. "Ma," his big brother hollered, "the kid's at it again." "Leave him alone, Ralph," his mother said. "He's just trying to learn." Flywheel, dentist's belt, and a nail. Well, a Cadillac flywheel, a dentist's belt, and a nail, and other pieces and parts, he built a recording lathe so that he could record his music. He made recordings of his guitar strumming and the harmonica humming, and then he played them back to figure out how to make it sound better. Soon he could whip out all sorts of knee-slapping hillbilly melodies. Everybody said he was super. But Lester wanted to be even better. He wanted to play with both sides of his harmonica as he plucked the guitar. "You only have 2 arms, you goofus," Ralph said. "You can't flip that harmonica and play the guitar at the same time. Everybody knows that's impossible." But Lester thought it was possible. So when Ralph left for work at the neighborhood dry cleaning store, Lester picked up a coat hanger and left lying around the house. He fitted the hanger over his shoulders and shaped the other ends to fit the harmonica so that he could flip the instrument with his chin and play twice as many sounds. Hot dog! It worked! He could hum and strum at the same time. At 13 years old, Lester called himself the Red Hot Red. He landed local gigs by playing his guitar harmonica act and telling funny stories. He performed for tips at nearby movie theaters, clubs, and drive-ins. Folks who sat up in front loved the act, but people in the back complained, "We can't hear you, Red. Nobody in the back can hear you play." Lester wanted his music to be heard up front and in the back, the way, way back. His tips depended on it. He thought until a solution struck him. He could make it louder. All he had to do was borrow a few things from home: a cinder block, a broomstick, a telephone, and a radio. He stuffed the broom handle into a cinder block and then mounted the telephone's mouthpiece on the top of the broom handle. There, a microphone stand. Then he wired it to the radio to create a speaker for his sound. Lester sang and played the harmonica into his homemade mic. Sure enough, the tune boomed from speaker to speaker. Hooray! Hooray! Folks in the front could hear. Folks in the back could hear. But a heckler in the way, way back sent a note to Lester. It read, Red, your voice is fine, your harmonica is fine, and your jokes are funny, but the guitar is not loud enough. Common problem. The guitar needs to be louder. Lester rummaged through the garage until a brilliant idea zipped into his mind to take a tone arm off of his father's phonograph player, jam the arm with the needle into the top of the guitar. He taped everything into place and then wired it into his dad's radio. "Geez," Ralph said, staring at the ruined phonograph. "What did you do that for?" If it plays a phonograph record, it must play the guitar, right? They both vibrate. He snatched up the contraption and headed back to Beekman's barbecue to test it in front of a crowd. It worked. A harmonica sounds floated from the radio speaker. Bazoo, zoo, zoo. The guitar strumming amplified from the other speaker. Strum, twang, strum, twang. Everyone could hear. It was a smashing success. Almost. The problem was it wasn't just the strings vibrating. The hollow space in the middle of the guitar vibrated too, making the speaker echo. Lester knew he could play cleaner tones if he could just stop the guitar from vibrating. How, though? It bamboozled him. There's a vocabulary word for you kids. Bamboozled. Bamboozled. It bamboozled him. He tried stuffing the hollow center with rags, socks, and tablecloth. Nope. Next, he filled it with plaster of Paris. That was a bust, and he ruined the guitar. Lester had one more idea. He borrowed a wagon and convinced his 4 friends to trek down a steep riverbank to the railroad tracks to help him. There he found a 2.5 foot piece of discarded steel rail. A railroad track. Back at home, he attached a guitar string to the rail and placed a telephone microphone under the string to pick up the sounds and vibrations. "Now, what are you doing?" Ralph asked. "There's only one way to do this," Lester said. "Steel is dense and free of vibrations that I don't want." He gave his steel guitar a strum. Wah, 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 boom, chicka, boom, wow, chicka, bow, wow. "Yowza," Ralph said. But his mom, who usually thought Lester was the cat's meow, shook her head and... "That'll be the day when I see the cowboy sitting on a horse playing a railroad track." All the cowboys in the movies and traveling shows played guitars. Shucks! Guitars and cowboys went together like peanut butter and jelly. If a cowboy wouldn't like this idea, then nobody would. Rats. But Lester pushed on. He tweaked and he tinkered until he found a way to amplify his acoustic guitar without echo and feedback. Twang! It sounded okay. Good. Even, but it wasn't the rich sound that he had heard the steel rail play. He continued practicing, and when he turned 17, his mom let him take his act on the road. Rhubarb Red. At 19 years old, he shortened his name from Lester Pulsfus to Les Paul. A few years later after that, he formed a band called the Les Paul Trio. He played hillbilly music in the daytime as Rhubarb Red, and later learned blues and jazz at night as the Wizard of Waukesha. He swapped licks on his guitar in Chicago and then in New York beside some of the greatest musicians of the time. The new style of music got Les's mind ticking again. He loved the variety of sounds, the vibrato of clarinets, ba-doom-ch, ba-doom-ch, ba-doom-ch of drums and the blurp of horns. But the twang of guitar was still wasn't loud enough. That's right, folks. The guitar still needs to be louder. You'll know you're a guitarist if you always think nobody can hear you. Oh. By the time that Les turned 24, he became a hotsy-totsy musician. Even President Franklin D. Roosevelt loved his tunes. When Les and his Razzmatazz jazz group performed at the White House, still, Les dreamed of the sound of that old iron rail and how he could make the electric guitar that held a note like that. How he could make an electric guitar that held a note like that. The question prickled and pestered his mind until 1941 when he was 26 years old. He didn't have equipment or a workshop. Nothing. But it was red hot red, rhubarb red, the Wizard of Waukesha. He could do anything he set his mind to. The night watchman at the Epiphone Guitar Factory let him in on Sundays. There he took a 4x4 piece of solid pine, hooked on an Epiphone neck, and his own homemade pickups and guitar strings. His solid body electric guitar looked like a log with strings on it, so he called it the Log. When he gave it a strum, wah wah wah, bow chicka bow wow, hot dog, Les Paul said, it was the best thing he'd ever heard. He took it to a swanky nightclub to show off his new sound. But when he played the Log in front of a crowd, they didn't applaud. They didn't boo. Folks just looked at one another. What is that thing? Huh? How could the audience not hear what he heard? But Les's shoulders didn't sink. His eyes didn't get stingy, and he did not give up. Maybe the audience hears with its eyes. So Les returned to the Epiphone factory and told the watchman, everyone's confused. They don't know it's a guitar. There, Les said. Now it looks more like a guitar. But it wasn't a regular guitar. It wasn't a solid body electric guitar. Wah, 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 bow, chicka, bow, wow. It purred, it hummed, it twanged in all the right ways. Finally, the sound he dreamt of came alive, and the crowd went wild. No matter what anyone told Les, he never stopped working on all kinds of sounds. His hard work earned him a place in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Grammy Hall of Fame, and many other halls of fame. He also received a Trustees Award from the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences. At 89, Les Paul was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. When he walked on stage to receive his award, noise erupted and boomed from the crowd. Clappity clap clap, roar, huzzah, hoorah, hooray! Hot dog, Les thought. All right, thanks for joining me for my story about Les Paul, the inventor of the electric guitar. And he never, ever gave up. That was the coolest part about his story. He never, ever gave up.